Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. In this video we are going to look at pivot tables, how we can use pivot tables for financial analysis. So what is a pivot table? Is functionality that is used to summarize large sums of data so that we can quickly dice and slice our data to answer key business questions. So Excel has a lot of functions, as we know, and pivot tables happens to be one of them. And so we are coming to leverage the power of pivot tables to answer real business questions using the data we are having. All right, so let's get into it. So this is our data, and we are coming to use it to answer some basic questions. So let's see, we have a data set containing some columns. So we have a column for store ID, we have a category ID, we have the sales manager column, we have the date, we have our sales revenue, we have the margin, we have city, and then we also have profits. So these are the columns that we have. So this is 3 6, so this is 8 columns in all. However, the number of rows that we have are, so right from here you can see we have well over 256,000 rows of data. 256,000 rows of data. All right, so yeah, coming to look at pivot tables and then how to use pivot table to answer questions relating to this data. Now it will amaze you what we can do with this small data here, just 8 columns of data, but we'll be able to get a lot of insight because of the power of pivot tables. All right, so we have our data. First of all, to be able to use the pivot table in Excel, we would have to format our data as a table. All right, so how do we format data as a table? This data is currently called a range. This is a range, which means it is unformatted as a table. So we call it a range in Excel. All right, so if we want to convert a range into a table, what we do is you click in any part of the data and then you can hit the shortcut key Control T, and Control T will give you the create table dialog, which you can see here, and then you will see that your entire range has been selected. So make sure that every part of the data is selected. Everything is within the selection border, as we can see here. And then you also indicate whether your data has headers. So in this particular data, we have headers. So we are good to go. We just click OK. So our data has been formatted as a table. Another way to format your data as a table is to click inside the data, the insert tab, and then clicking on table at the top left corner. Now, currently the table icon is unselectable because our data is already selected as a table. All right, so that is how we convert a range or a data into an Excel table. And now there are advantages to having your data selected as a table, but in this particular video that is not our focus. So our focus is to see how we can use pivot tables to analyze, slice, and dice our data for quick analysis. All right, so once our data is selected as a table, we'll still click inside the data, click on, and then we come to the insert tab and click on our pivot table icon. So you click on the pivot table icon, and that will bring out the pivot table dialog. All right, so the first argument here is select the table or range. So this is our table selected. So our table is already selected and we have no problem with that. Then the second one is choose where you want the pivot table to be placed. All right, so we want to place our pivot table in an existing worksheet, and the existing worksheet is the pivot table worksheet here, and I want to place it in cell B2. All right, so I'll just hit OK. Okay, so this is our pivot table menu. So this is our pivot table, and in the pivot table we have the fields for our columns in our data. In case we are having more than one table, they will all be displayed here with their respective columns. And then we also have the field, the pivot table field. And in the field, it is divided into four. We have the filters, we have the columns, we have the rows, and then we also have the values. The value is for numerical data. So whenever you check a box against the numerical data, so for example, our store ID is a numerical data. So when I check it, it will appear in the values column. All right. So and then the data, and then the rows and the columns are used depending on what you want to analyze or what you are analyzing. Okay, so that is it. And then the filters are our data, filtering our data. Maybe you want to filter with a particular column, you can put that column into your filters to filter your data for you. All right, so we'll explore all of this and then we'll see how it goes. All right, so we can use our data which is here, to answer some quick business questions. Quick questions. All right, so we want to know, we have a store ID, which means these are stores, IDs representing our stores. So let us see how much profit is made in each of the stores. So we have a store one. So let's click on the drop down menu and see how many stores we are having. So stores, 40 stores in all. We have 40 stores in all. And we want to know how much each store generates in revenue and profits. All right, so we can use our pivot table to answer that question. So we come to our pivot table. Now we want to analyze our stores. So and drag the stores into our rows. We want to analyze the stores by revenue, sales revenue. So we put the revenue inside our values, and then we also put our profits inside the values. And we have this. So store one, this is how much they generated in revenue. This is how much they generated in profits. Store two, like that. Now this data can be formatted, so we can right click inside our data, go to sort, and then we can sort from largest to smallest. All right, so the numbers, we can see that the numbers are not formatted properly as values. So we can right click any value in the date in the pivot table, and then we go to number format. So we go to number format, click on the number format, and then we are looking at currency. So we will have 0 decimal place. The symbol should be a dollar sign, and then we want our negative values to be in brackets and then in red. All right, so we click OK. So that is it. We'll do same for this, our currency, 0 decimal places, and then we will format our negative numbers to be red and in brackets. All right, so we have this data nicely formatted, and then we know that it has given us the grand total of our revenues and then the grand total of our profits. All right, so that is it. Now we want to answer another question, and a possible question from our data is, we want to analyze the sales managers. How much profit did they generate? How much revenue did they generate? And then our city as well. So we want to look at our sales managers performance. So we come to our pivot table. Now instead of inserting a new pivot table, what we can do is to select this pivot table, and is to select the pivot table, and then we can copy it. and paste. Copy and paste it. So let's enlarge our cells so that we are able to show the figures properly. Now we are not interested in stores, so in order to remove this, we can either click and drag it into the empty area, or we can by unselecting that particular column, unselecting the particular column. All right, so this one we are going to analyze our sales managers. So we put our sales managers into the rows, and then we'll put our revenue into the values, profits into the values. Now we have the same data here. And another way to do this is we can right click our data. So let's format our numbers as currency as we did before. So we have currency, 0 decimal place, currency, 0 decimal places. Now another way of summarizing our data is, so we have our managers, we have their sales revenue, we have their sum of profits. Now we can change your values. What you know is that we can change your values. Now right now it is showing sum, so the automatic format is it will format your data as sum. So when we right click the data, when we right click so when we right click the data, and then we go to show values as, so we can see summarize value as sum, count, average, max, mean, product, etc. So but this is sum is what we wanted, so sum is okay. Then we can also summarize using values. So show values as, so we have percent of grand total, percent of column total, percent of row total, like that. So we have all this. Now let's see how we are going to do that. So we want to know the percentage of profit each manager is generating on their revenue. All right, so what we will do is we will add another profit column. We will drag the profits into our profit column again. Now instead of showing this, we will show value as a percent of the grand total, as a percent of the grand total, and then we can sort it from largest to smallest. Okay, so just look at this. So we have our profits. So we have the percent of profit. Michael Lester contributes 10.10% of the total profit. Uh, whilst Faith Ann makes a profit of 10.2%, and she comes second, followed by McCain 10.2, John Bosco 10.2, as just like that. So this is how we can use our pivot table to quickly analyze any data. And use it to analyze any data. Now let's look at the city performance. Let's look at how the city is performing. So we can actually copy the data again. Copy, and let me paste it below here. And then we are not interested in our sales manager anymore. We're not interested in the sales manager. So what we will do is to bring our city, bring the city into the rows. Alright, so this is our city's performance. This is our city's performance. So Alabama comes to the highest contributor of the profits. Now let's also analyze the percent of revenue and see what is happening there. So let's drag our revenue into the values once again and format as a percentage. So we'll drag our revenue to this, and then let us format it. Show the value as a percent of the grand total. Now we want to arrange it in such a way that revenue, the percent of revenue will come. So we can sort that right here. So I'll click and drag it and drop it right here. So we have revenue. So we can even rename. So we can rename our sales revenue column as sales revenue dollars and click enter, and then we can rename this one as the sales revenue percent. Click enter. So instead of the sum, we can actually remove the sum. Okay, then we have the profit. So we have sum of profits in dollars, and then our sum of profits as a percentage. Alright, so we have our data analyzed rightly here. Now what we are coming to do is to name our pivot tables. So we'll click inside the pivot table, go to pivot table analyze on a ribbon, pivot table analyze, and then we can rename our pivot table. So the first one is the stores performance. Stores performance. So we have our stores performance. Then this one is our sales manager's performance. So performance of, we have performance of sales managers. Then we can also rename this particular one as performance. Okay, let's do it city performance. Alright, so we have that. Now what we can do is to insert what we call a slicer. We can insert what we call a slicer. So we can go to our insert tab, and then we see slicer, insert a slicer. So I'll click on the insert slicer, and then what do we want to slice our data by? So we want to slice our data by the, let's see category. Let's check category and see how it will look. So we have by category. By category. So this is our slicer. Now when I click on the slicer, it should be able to filter all our pivot tables for us. So if I click on category 1, it should filter it, category 2. So as you can see, now this slicer currently is connected to only one of the pivot tables. So you see that when I click on any of the categories, it is filtering only this pivot table. This one remains unchanged, or it is not able to slice this particular data. So let me move my slicer to this place. Let me move it here. So we have the category slicer here. So what we do is we will right click on the slicer, and then we go to report connections. Report connections. Now when you click on report connections, you will have the ability to select the other pivot tables that are not connected to our slicer. So we have the performance of sales manager, and then the stores performance not connected. So we select them, and then we hit OK. So right now when I select any category, it will filter all of them. So as you can see, it dynamically filters according to the category. Now we can also analyze our data using visuals, and we can use what we call the pivot chart to analyze our visuals. So we can click inside any of the pivot tables. Let's say we want to analyze it by city. So I'll click inside the pivot table, and then I'll go to insert, and then I'll click on pivot chart. So let me click on pivot chart, and then we have our recommended it has recommended a bar chart for us, a column chart. So we can actually change it. You can actually select any of them. So let's select this particular one, the 3D clustered column charts. We hit OK. So we have this. You can put it here nicely. So this is a visualization of our city's performance on revenue and profit. And this chart is the same thing we have in this table. So they are having the same thing. Whatever happens to this pivot table happens to whatever change we make to the pivot table will reflect in the pivot chart. Alright, so let's do some little bit of formatting. So we can click inside there. Let's do some little bit of formatting here. So we can click our data bars, the blue one, and then let's choose a fill color. Let's choose the deep blue here, and then this particular one, let's right let's right click and choose a fill color. Let's pick this orange color here. So nicely. So we have formatted our data nicely, and I think it's okay. So this is how we can quickly use pivot tables to analyze data. Thank you very much for your time. I hope to see you again. Kindly subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and consider leaving your comments, like the video so that others will also benefit. Thank you, and I'll see you again.